I have been trying to write this for 22 hours, but I just could not do it because it is difficult where I am. And every time I tried, I simply stopped, but I need to get this out because it feels like something unfinished that refuses to close. And that night, I finally found Mike. I was brushing my teeth, wishing my father had a different job, and wishing we had never moved to this city. Just as I started to adapt, everything began to fall apart again. I could not get Mike out of my head, and his absence and his messy house made no sense at all. I had double-checked the address he gave me, and I went to the right place, and Mike was always very careful with details. So why would he send me to that address? As I went over everything in my head trying to understand what was happening, I let the water run over my toothbrush and realized I was no longer brushing. So I turned off the tap and got ready for bed. I was ready to stop thinking and let my brain rest, but as I opened the bathroom door, I heard a light dripping sound, and thinking I had not closed the tap completely, I went back to make sure it was shut. Then I turned to go to bed, and that was when I heard the tap turn fully open, pouring water into the sink, and I froze as my body went cold and my joints locked. Because slowly, I turned back to the sink, trying not to look at the mirror, but my eyes moved anyway. What I saw could not be real because my friend was lying next to me in the reflection, and as I slowly approached the mirror, I could see every disturbing detail his body was. Pressed against the wall, with his head tilted to one side, and his face looked swollen and discolored with dark stains around his mouth and nose. His shirt was torn and his arms hung loosely by his side as my throat released a sound of pure fear, half sigh and half scream. I turned so hard that my shoulder hit the wall, but the bathroom was empty. So I turned back to the mirror, and the figure from before was now standing over the still body of my friend. For a split second, I blinked and they were gone, but I swear the figure was smiling. My hands were shaking as tears began to fill my eyes, and I stumbled back to my room trying to lock the door, even though it had no lock, so I pushed my desk against it as if that would make a difference. I could not remember how to breathe, and the air would not fill my lungs, as if the room had lost pressure. So I passed out, and when I woke up, the nightmare felt real, because the figure in the mirror had changed and stayed closer behind my reflection. Me to feel its presence. I saw him in the hallway mirror and in the closet mirror, and his hood seemed to tilt as if he was studying my face. My parents noticed something was wrong, but only in the distant way parents sometimes notice when a child begins to withdraw. I stopped eating, my grades dropped, and I started avoiding reflections on my phone screen. So I began covering the mirrors with towels, and then uncovering them again, because I could not stand not knowing. My mother asked if I was being bullied, and my father asked if I was using drugs, but neither of them heard me when I said no. One night I woke up with a feeling of intense fear, like an instinct warning me that something was in my room. I heard the floor creak next to my bed, and my eyes widened, trying to capture the moonlight through the closed blinds. But I saw nothing then. The floor creaked on the other side of my bed, and I jumped up in panic. But there was nothing there, so slowly, my eyes turned to the closet mirror, and in the dim light, my reflection was there and behind. Yet the hooded figure was inches away, so close that the dark fabric of the hood almost touched my reflected hair, and I could not move. The figure raised one of its hands slowly and placed it on the shoulder of my reflection, and my reflected shoulder lowered slightly, as if under weight, and I felt the pressure that did not exist on my real body. I looked away sharply and closed my eyes, whispering that this was not real. But when I opened them, the figure was gone, though the pressure on my shoulder remained for a few seconds, like a presence fading. After that, the mirror stopped hiding and showed me something else. The next time I saw it, the hood lifted slightly, like a curtain opening, just a little, and two dark eyes shimmered under the shadow, while a mouth appeared, stretching into a smile that did not belong to any normal expression, showing too many teeth. My legs failed, and I felt something grab my reflection in the mirror as the figure reached out and held my reflected wrist, and my real body jerked forward, and my feet slid toward the sink until the surface of the mirror rippled like water. I was pulled through the glass and landed hard on the cold tile. Only everything was reversed, like someone had flipped the house around. The toothbrush holder was on the wrong side, and the light was wrong because all surfaces were bathed in a faint red glow, as if the air itself carried a strange illumination. I turned to the mirror, and through the glass my real bathroom stared back at me with the hooded figure standing inside my real home, in my real world. She looked at me and smiled again, then turned her head as if listening, and I knew with certainty that my parents were sleeping. At the end of the hallway, she moved away from the mirror, and I hit the glass with my hands, screaming until my voice failed. But the sound came out distorted and muffled, as if being swallowed by the air. I watched the figure go out of sight, and then I was alone in that mirrored place, running to the hallway where the red light pulsed. Slowly, every room looked the same, just reversed, like a cruel imitation, and I ran to the hallway mirror, seeing the figure moving. In the distance from room to room, as if it belonged there, I realized this mirrored house was a system of openings that could be used both ways, and I saw the body of my friend hidden behind the sofa in the real living room. His skin looked pale, and his mouth hung open, and the sickness in my stomach returned because that thing had taken him and kept him there as evidence. I watched through the glass as the figure entered my parents' bedroom, and my father sat up, confused, but it was too late, because the figure moved too fast like a shadow that refused to stay still. I saw my father being thrown against the wall, and the arm of the hooded figure reached out and grabbed my mother by the neck. The movements were controlled and effortless, as if it had done this before, and I saw dark stains spread across the wall, and then my parents stopped moving. The figure stood in the room for a moment, observing what it had done, then walked to the hallway, and I followed from mirror to mirror, crying and gasping, until I reached my bathroom again and found the mirror empty, but then my reflection smiled, even though I was not smiling. The figure appeared and pulled back its hood, revealing my own face with dark, empty eyes and a wide, distorted mouth. It reached through the glass and grabbed my wrists, and everything turned black until I woke up in my bed. At first I thought it was a dream, but then I saw small dark spots on the carpet leading to my parents' room, and the smell reached me first sharp and heavy as I opened the door to find the room covered in dark stains, with no bodies, but fragments of things I could not identify scattered. Across the bed I fell to my knees, shaking, and staggered back to the bathroom where I saw the figure in the reflection, standing with the still shapes of my parents behind it. The figure pulled back the hood, and the face underneath was mine with the same eyes and the same mouth, but the smile was too wide, and I realized people would prefer the story where I was responsible more than the story where something lived inside the mirrors. They found my fingerprints everywhere, and traces of what happened on my clothes, so I was convicted, and now I spend my days in a cell, watching the hooded shape, smiling in the polished metal of the sink, because it is waiting for me to blink. It was a random Tuesday night, and I was a broke man, sitting in my small and cheap apartment, scrolling through job forums in search of any hope. I was going to get married in 2 months, and was desperately looking for a job, because if I wanted to start a family, I had to do it. She was beautiful, and a reliable woman with blonde hair, blue eyes, and if I did not get a job soon, she would probably leave me shortly after the wedding. I found the website advertising a delivery job, and the pay was good, so I clicked the application link and applied, even though I was skeptical. 2 weeks later, I received a letter from Mr. Roberts saying I was eligible to be a driver. There was only one rule, which was that you could never open the packages you were delivering, but I ignored it because I needed the money so bad. The first delivery was in a falling apart apartment building, and the atmosphere was unsettling. The elevator was broken, and the room door looked like it had survived an apocalypse. The room number was covered in a dark brown stain. I left the package and heard a loud creak behind me that sounded like it came from another world, and I just ran back to my car as fast as I could. I earned $200 in just 3 deliveries, so I started to pay attention to what was in those boxers. That was when I discovered strange things. One package was supposed to contain a PS5, but it was lighter than a penny, so I opened it, and what I found inside made me scream. It was a human remains that looked like they had been cleanly removed from a body. I continued delivering out of fear, and the packages got worse, containing more parts of what used to be people, until the final box arrived. I opened it, and my world collapsed, because there she was, my fiancée, looking back at me with cold eyes. Her life had been packed into that wooden box in the most gruesome way imaginable, and beside her was a note saying, "You are next." I reported this to the police, but there was no evidence, and I fell into a deep depression. It is now midnight, and I heard a knock on my door 2 hours ago. I looked through the peephole and saw a man holding a blade, and I am scared to death typing this because once you see what is inside the box, the system will never let you go back to your old life, so never trust the silent deliveries. Moving into that crumbling apartment building was the only choice I had since the rent was lower than anything else in this Diane city. The walls were thin enough to hear the neighbors breathing, and the hallways always smelled like damp earth and copper. I was assigned to apartment 400, to right next to that infamous door that seemed to swallow all light around. At apartment 403, never had a visitor, but the floorboards inside would groan constantly as if someone was pacing back and forth, waiting for a sign. The first week was quiet until the deliveries started arriving in the dead of night, and I would hear the elevator doors being forced open, with a metallic shriek that echoed through my bedroom wall. Curiosity eventually got the better of me, so I started looking through my own peephole every time. I heard that heavy thud in the hallway. I saw the same delivery man every night, looking pale and exhausted, dropping boxers that made no sound when they hit the floor. One night, I found a box at my own door. It was a small cardboard package with my name written in a handwriting that looked exactly like mine from 10 years ago. I broke the rule of the building and brought it inside to open it, and my heart stopped when I saw what was resting on the bubble wrap. It was my old silver watch, the one I had lost in a lake when I was 12 years ago. And it was still ticking, even though it had been underwater for a decade. There was no explanation for how it got into that sealed box. The deliveries for apartment 403 became more frequent, and the sounds coming from behind that door changed from pacing to a wet scraping noise, as if something heavy was being dragged across the floor. I started receiving more packages, to each one containing a piece of my past that should have been gone forever. Like the hospital bracelet from my birth and a lock of hair from my first dog. I felt like someone was harvesting my memories and shipping them back to me in these brown boxers. I decided to confront the person in 403, but when I stood in front of that door, the air turned cold, and the dark stains on the room number started to pulse like a slow heartbeat. I knocked once, and the door creaked open just an inch, revealing a darkness so thick it felt solid. I saw hundreds of unopened boxers stacked to the ceiling, and a pair of eyes reflecting the hallway light from the shadows. Those eyes were not human. They were glassy and fixed, like the eyes of a doll. I backed away, tripping over a new delivery that had just been placed behind me. It was a long box shaped like a person, and my name was printed on the shipping label in bright red ink. I realized then that the packages were not just bringing back my past, they were preparing for my future. The scraping noise inside 403 stopped, and the door began to swing wide open, revealing a dark figure holding a roll of packing tape and a heavy industrial tool waiting for me to step inside. I ran back to my room and locked every bolt, but the sound of the tape dispenser started right outside my door, followed by the heavy breathing of someone who had all the time in the world. I looked at my phone to call for help, but the only app working was a delivery tracker showing a package had been successfully delivered to my exact location. I am hiding now, listening to the sound of my own front door being forced open from its hinges by the man from the hallway. The boxers in the hallway are empty now because they are waiting for me to fill them up, and I can hear the scraping noise getting closer to my bedroom floor. It turns out the client in 403 was not a person at all, but a collector of lives who used the delivery service to harvest souls for a market we cannot comprehend. If you see a box at your door with your old handwriting on it, do not bring it inside, because once you accept the delivery, you become part of the inventory forever. I used to be a senior lead developer for a shadow startup that vanished from the internet overnight, leaving no digital footprint behind. We were building an interface for a logistics application called Logos, and the pay was triple what any other company offered. At the time, the office was located in a windowless basement of an old industrial complex, where the servers hummed with a low frequency that made your teeth ache every single morning. My only job was to optimize the delivery route algorithm. The code was written in a language I had never seen before, appearing more like ancient symbols than modern syntax. But I did not ask questions. As long as the direct deposits kept hitting my bank account, the algorithm did not calculate the fastest route based on traffic or distance. Instead, it mapped out what the lead architect called points of destiny. Where the fabric of reality was thinnest, I realized the app was not tracking trucks. It was tracking the life force of the drivers and the clients alike. One night, I decided to look into the backend database to see what was actually being shipped across the city. And my screen filled with high-resolution photos of people who had not even downloaded the app yet, including a folder with my own name on it. Inside were pictures of me sleeping in my apartment, taken from angles that were physically impossible from the street. I found a hidden line in the terms of service that stated, "The user agrees to provide all physical assets upon request." Before it truly began, when I saw the live map showing thousands of active delivery drivers moving across the city in patterns that formed a massive dark seal when viewed. From above, every package delivered was a component of a larger machine, and the gruesome remains inside were not just trophies, but fuel for the engine we had built in the basement. I tried to delete my profile from the system, but the delete button was replaced by a countdown timer showing exactly 4 hours. I gathered my hard drives and fled the building, but as I drove away, my phone started vibrating uncontrollably with a series of notifications from the Logos app saying a new collection task had been assigned to my current GPS coordinates. I looked in my rearview mirror and saw 3 identical black delivery vans following me. No matter how fast I drove, the app started playing a sound that sounded like a distorted scream in reverse, and my dashboard lights turned blood red. I abandoned my car in a crowded shopping mall hoping to lose them, but every person I passed was looking at their phones with a glazed expression, and I realized they were all users of the same network. The system was not just an app, it was a digital parasite that had already infected the entire city. I found a discarded delivery box in a trash can, and when I peeked inside, I saw my own employee badge covered in a dark wet stain with a note that said, "Return to sender. The black vans are now parked outside the motel where I am currently hiding." And I can hear the familiar sound of heavy footsteps and 4 stores echoing through the hallway. The terms of service were never meant to be read by humans, because they were written by something that does not understand. Mercy, the timer on my phone has reached 0, and the notification screen says, "Your package is ready for pickup." And I can hear the sound of a heavy industrial tool outside my room. The door is starting to buckle under the pressure, and I realize that the entire world is just one massive warehouse waiting to be processed by the Logos algorithm. We are all just inventory items waiting for our turn to be boxed and shipped to the dark corners of the universe. If you see an ad for a high-paying delivery job, delete your cookies and throw your phone away before the system decides that you are the next asset to be harvested. I took the job as a night shift security guard for an old shopping mall that was closed for major renovations. And the pay way too high for just sitting in a room watching 50 screens. The previous guard left without saying a word and only left a handwritten note on the desk warning me about the rules of the monitoring station. He said the most important thing to remember is that if you see anyone walking in camera 24, you must never look at camera 25 under any circumstances. The mall was a maze of empty hallways and plastic-covered mannequins that seemed to shift slightly whenever I blinked, and the silence felt overwhelming, as if it was pressing in from all sides. I spent the first few nights staring at the grainy monitors, drinking cold coffee, and trying to ignore the dark shapes forming. At the edge of the screens, the mall felt abandoned and frozen in time. But the money was the only thing keeping me in that swivel chair every night. On the 4th night, I noticed movement on camera 24, which showed the main fountain area, and I saw a woman in a vintage red dress walking slowly toward the center of the mall. She looked out of place, like she belonged to another era, and she was staring directly into the lens with a smile that looked unnatural. I remembered the warning, but curiosity built up until I finally turned my head to look. Camera 25 was supposed to show the same hallway from another angle, but instead it showed the mall as it appeared decades earlier during its grand opening, and the place was crowded with shoppers all moving in perfect synchronization. The woman in the red dress was there as well, but this time, every person around her had smooth, pale faces with no visible features. and they all stopped at once. They turned toward the camera as if they could see me sitting in the security room years later, and the woman in the red dress raised her hand and pointed directly at the screen. The mall around me began to change as the temperature dropped rapidly, and the familiar smell of popcorn was replaced by a sharp, unfamiliar odor. I heard the sound of countless footsteps echoing through the corridors, even though the mall was still empty. I looked back at camera 24, and the fountain area was now filled with dark shapes, spreading along the walls and moving toward the security office. The woman in the red dress was now standing just outside my door, and I could see her reflection in the dark monitors. Even though the door remained locked, she began tapping on the glass with a long dark fingernail, the sound steady and rhythmic as she quietly said that my shift was over. That was when I understood that camera 25 was not showing the past, but another version of the mall where it never closed, and the visitors never left because they were part of it. I tried a radio for help, but the only sound coming through was an old department store jingle from the 1990s, playing slowly and distorted by a low mechanical hum. The power began to fail, and the monitors shut off one by one, leaving the room completely dark. The woman in the red dress is now inside the room with me, and I can feel the air shift behind me as she says the new manager wants to see me on the basement level where the cameras do not reach. If you ever find a job listing for a night watchman in a place that feels abandoned by time, do not stare at the screens for too long, because whatever is watching from the other side is always searching for someone to stay.